this is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hi guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, here with Dr. Kori Propst. We're going to be talking about macronutrients again, back in our macro mastery category. And Kori, I thought it would be a good idea to start picking apart some meal timing issues. We've got a huge surge of interest in intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. Of course, keto and paleo never goes away. But I thought if we start digging down into exactly what happens on a physiological level with different types of eating for different reasons, we might be able to sort some of these things out. So pre-workout meals, you up for that?
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. And I keep thinking of the word context, because I get so many emails about intermittent fasting and just fielded one this morning. And when should I eat and what should the window be? And I kept thinking context.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you just totally ripped away the punchline. That's going to be where we end up.
Okay, and we're done.
So let me tell you, there's probably 2 or 3 things that happened in the last couple of weeks that made me converge on this as a necessary topic. Number one, my training schedule changed when my youngest daughter went back to school. So that changes my whole workday. And I thought, I just don't want to wake up and just slam down breakfast and get to work when I'm really not hungry. And getting up early to take her to school would force that. I also have to then adjust, my training time. I really like to train in the late morning or early afternoon when I've had a little food, I'm more awake. That is always better for me. But when I get to work this early now, there's kind of some pressure like, well, I might as well just train and get it out of the way. So here's what I had to do. I could do my normal thing in this context, as you said, which would be to at least get a small meal in and then do my training, then have a little bit bigger post-workout meal. So at least I have something in the tank. Blood amino acids are increasing, blood sugar's increasing a little bit. That's what I've always done, and that's been fine. But I thought, okay, here's my time to test this intermittent fasted, time-restricted eating methodology personally, which I love applying those kind of things to my own routines just to see, how I respond.
Right.
And it's just horrible. I have been coming to work and thinking, okay, I've had a little caffeine, I'm hydrated, I'm ready to go. And within 10 minutes, all of my good intentions just end up crashing into this pool of low energy. And I have just crappy workouts, whether I'm trying to do cardio with intensity or training. So before I break down some of the studies I looked into and all that, what is your personal experience?
Well, so long ago when I was a young lad,
which is another story we'll save.
And had just started training. I was training fasted. I've always typically trained in the morning. That's the time for me where I feel my best. We've trained together in the past, and when you would be like, we're going to train in the afternoon. It doesn't matter how much food I have in me. I feel like a sloth. I feel heavy. I'm like, in the morning, not the case at all, whether I've had food or not. In the morning, my best time. I've trained fasted and then started having a pre-workout meal, feel much better comparing the two, feel much better having a pre-workout meal. And my pre-workout meals vary in terms of size, depending on what I'm doing and what I'm including in terms of protein and carbohydrates, but they always include carbs.
So let's go into that. Let's talk about the different types of workouts you might do. And just to lay out the context, you love and value cardiovascular work, functional work. You're not necessarily going in the gym saying, how much can I squat today? You just want to have an amazingly functional athletic workout. So that's your bias, correct?
It is now, yes.
Okay.
It used to be, well, caveat to that, I have always loved endurance exercise. And I've always included cardiovascular work in with my training, but at one point I was focusing on those max lifts. Now, not the case. No.
Okay. So go through the different types of meals you might do for each different context.
Okay, so let's use today as an example. I was going to do a 40-minute cycling workout. This is going to be an interval workout where I'm alternating between over functional threshold power and just under functional threshold power. So it's pretty intense. And then I just followed that up. So 40 minutes of intervals, followed that up with 20 minutes of yoga stretching. I had 2 lightly salted rice cakes with 5 grams of peanut butter on each one and a little bit of jam. So that's about 20 carbohydrates and very little protein, maybe 5 grams of protein and 4 grams of fat. Now, I will do that same pre-workout meal for a short, let's say, 30-minute to 90-minute cycling session. If I do a 90-minute cycling session, that still suits me very, very well, depending on the intensity. If I am going to go do, say, my Saturday group rides, I'm going to be on my bike for 4 hours. I am incorporating a larger pre-workout meal. I'm still going to do my 2 rice cakes with peanut butter, but I'm going to also do, I do half a cup of cottage cheese and some fruit. So now I'm increasing the amount of carbs, but I'm also increasing the amount of protein that I have because I'm going to be going probably 2 hours before I eat another meal of 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates because those outdoor workouts are going to be a lot more intense. I'm going to be burning more calories.
So will you stop and have a snack, or do you do any kind of liquid carbohydrate throughout the ride?
I don't do any liquid carbohydrate unless the ride is typically over 4 hours long. If I'm getting into 5, 6, 7 hours, that's when I'm starting to incorporate the liquid carbs.
So let me stop you there, because what I'm noticing, first of all, is that there is no hard, fast rule for you. You're not saying this is the way to do something. If I'm going to do an hour-long workout, a 2-hour-long ride, a 4-hour-long ride, my needs change, so I'm going to adjust. So very, very important precept. Because when we're talking about this topic, we all have different goals, first of all. And as I look through research, what I'm finding people are studying the most are, number one, how subjects feel. So they're taking a lot of surveys and measuring perceived energy, asking them how you feel during your workout, having this, kind of liquid formula pre-workout, maybe some food, maybe just water. Then they're actually measuring output, things like power, strength, the time to fatigue. I didn't see any EMG studies like that, but they're measuring that than just total work volume and output. And then even longer term, this is hard to do super long term, but they're at least looking at lean body mass changes, metabolic changes over maybe 6 to 12 weeks. And here's what we can understand so far, or at least claim that the literature supports. Number one, when you have zero nutrition pre-workout, you just wake up and then you go train, versus having some kind of nutrition, people on no calories whatsoever feel their worst, just flat out, no way to sugarcoat that. But when you look at the types of nutrition that you could have pre-workout, there's quite a variety, because there are a lot of people out there trying to still prove that ketogenic dieting as a lifestyle is appropriate and effective. So you can have just branched chain aminos, you can have just protein. Some people will do just branched chain aminos, creatine, and caffeine, something like that. So that has been well studied. And interestingly, any nutrition intervention at all increases how people feel, increases pure power and strength output, time to failure or time to fatigue. So getting anything is first of all of tremendous value. Then you really have to start looking at your goals and what your entire nutrition status is, which we'll talk about next. It looks like you wanted to jump in there, Kori.
Yeah, well, what I forgot to mention, because I was thinking food, solid food, pre-workout, I am taking branched chains. I'm mixing that in with caffeine, a pre-workout powder, and creatine. Okay. And I've had people ask me too, like creatine as a endurance athlete? Yeah, because it actually has been shown to increase your level of endurance and time to fatigue and to spare glycogen. So I do that in combination with my carbohydrate meal. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's important because all those things matter when you're talking about those tiny amounts of substrates in your bloodstream that can increase performance, because while you are recovering, especially if you're doing normal training where you're at least going to be resting between sets or cycles, you are resynthesizing ATP, glucose is being resynthesized, amino acid content. So you really are almost looking at priming the pump, so to speak, where you're getting something in there to increase your work output, get your body going to those points where you can be in more of a glycolytic energy system model or oxygen debt. But here's again what's interesting about the context, because what they're finding, again, in very short-term studies, you can't consider anything even up to 12 weeks, something that's going to show long-term lean body mass gain or depletion, that sort of thing. But they're showing that you do adapt. I mentioned this several podcasts ago, that if you're going to go on any kind of intermittent fasting protocol, or you're ketogenic and you're training fasted, your body can start adapting so that you are up to, so far I've only seen up to 40%, which is significant amounts of better use of fat as energy. So it's one of the things I'm trying now, even though I said this really horrible, I'm hating this kind of thing, doing this fasted training. My first concession was exactly as you might expect, having trained with me. I'm just not going to train in the mornings with what I value, which would be more my core lifts, squatting, deadlifting, that kind of thing. But I still do like the way I feel having trained in the morning, just oxygen, blood flow, all of that. So I am coming in fasted, and I'm doing, I started out with just 10 minutes of cardio, and that's when I start to feel like I'm kind of bonking. I gradually increased that to 15 and now 20 minutes of cardio. I probably won't go above maybe 30 total if I even get that high, because that's when, on a fasted level, me being in calorie maintenance to slight calorie reduction levels, I'm simply going to start going through an attrition of lean body mass. And that's not my goal. I could buffer that with, as you're doing, loading in, creatine pre-workout, branched chain aminos, maybe even some glutamine, which is, a mediator between your muscle tissue using glucose and amino acids intramuscularly. So anyway, what I want to do for right now is talk about how people can apply this to your own training, and then of course take really, really good notes. First of all, I would say break down your goals into how you want your morning training or your fasted training to go in these three priority levels. Number one, how you feel, your perceived strength and energy, your ability to create total work volume. Number two would be strength and lean body mass goals. And then number three would be, body fat loss. Which one of those, you got to rank those to decide what kind of pre-workout meals might be more appropriate. So one of the things that we do know is, as soon as you have any carbohydrate at all in the morning before training, you're going to start increasing your ability to reduce lean body mass loss. You're going to stave off amino acid degradation, breakdown, and all that good stuff. But we also have that correlating question then, how much is too much? Because as you said, if I have too much, I just feel like a sloth. I don't feel good. I've got this huge gut load. My parasympathetic nervous system is kicking in now. So there's got to be a balance there. How did you arrive, Kori, at 2 rice cakes and a little peanut butter and jam? What's your methodology?
I'm not working on body fat loss right now. That's not a goal of mine. I'm working on performance. So when I've been in a space where body fat loss was of concern to me, I was having 1 rice cake. I was reducing the amount of carbohydrates I was consuming, still knowing that those carbs were going to be important to increase, body heat and immediately when I start to train. And I was still doing the branched chains. I was still doing the creatine and the glutamine and the caffeine also. But that's my main thing is, I'm not trying to lose body fat right now. So a bit more easily digestible carbohydrate for me for those training sessions is completely appropriate.
So let's just go through, because I think this is very important. Number one, you perfectly stated again how your context changes will dictate your nutrition changes.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are talking about our experiences, but we've also worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of clients over the years. Mm-hmm. And I certainly hear the same things. One of the things that I ask people who are used to doing fasted cardio or fasted training, if they're going to increase nutrition prior, I'll say, take some notes. Do you notice that your heart rate gets up more easily? Do you notice that you sweat sooner? Do you notice when during the workout that your work output increases? Mm-hmm. And I know this is somewhat anecdotal, but to a person, they always notice all of those things happening because body temperature is increasing, your work capacity is increasing. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I really don't think you need much clinical research to prove that point. Mm-hmm. It reminds me, Kori, I got in a Facebook fight with somebody last week.
Ooh.
It's just so tragic that this even has to happen. But so here's what's happening. A friend of mine who owns a big company and he does a lot of social media work, he put something out there. I rarely post on anybody else's stuff. I just refrain from that on purpose for this exact reason. But he stated something that I thought, well, that's, in a tiny nuanced context true, but there's such a broader picture here. Maybe his readers would enjoy this as a bigger topic. So I post something, and within seconds, somebody posts, citation needed. Oh. And I'm like, citation for what? Well, you didn't leave a citation. And I said, well, it's just normal physiology. What I was talking about specifically, I had forgotten until I'm reenacting this. Now it's all coming back to me. We were talking about body fat loss and how at a minimum on adipose cells, there are 5 different types of receptors. And we know enzymes, hormones, neuroendocrine regulators, all of those things have this cliched lock and, key mechanism, right? So it takes specific hormones to attach to certain receptors on body fat cells. And that's why different ways of training, different ways of eating, dieting, the type of caloric deficit you can be in, involves the type of or affects the type of body fat loss you get in certain areas of your body. So again, just this is truly physiology, biochemistry 101. And so this guy wanted to pick apart this. And I said, I can't tell you a study because it's like, here's a textbook on biochemistry. Just go read the chapter on lipolysis. It's right there. And this is one of those things, Kori, where it's so common knowledge, but today's culture, especially in social media, is to look at one study. Show me one exact study that shows me one thing, and that will be my gospel forever. Yes. And here's the problem with that. Mm-hmm. I can show you a study that proves something to be true. Mm-hmm. I can show you another study that proves that exact same thing to be false. Mm-hmm. And we can go back and forth between even, who sponsored the study. That was one of the studies I looked at in preparation for this podcast, showed that there was no change. You could be fasted, non-fasted, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And guess who sponsored that study? A national CrossFit organization. Mm. And before I say that there was probably some subversive ulterior agenda there, let's just say, for the sake of giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, that those particular subjects maybe train aggressively no matter what. Maybe they're so hyped up and coached so well that for that context, that study group, those researchers, there might not have been any change. But let's put that in the entire compendium of research, and let's see how it fits in as just one spoke of that wheel. So you know this about me. That's how I like to discuss research. Maybe one study is interesting to note that, hey, somebody just found this. That's interesting. Let's put it in the context of everything else. Yeah. But in all of this, Kori, I'm never going to be swayed with a pre-workout or post-workout meal nutritionally that one study proved XYZ. one study rarely proves anything. Would you agree?
Totally. Absolutely. Yes. And that's why we have qualitative studies too, folks, because the lived experience is very, very important.
Yeah, and I went off on that tangent just to say that anybody could argue this point, and you're certainly welcome to. That you don't need these things. I will show you 50 more studies that prove you do, and we can fight like that forever until everybody knows the same amount of knowledge that's out there. Meaning, all of the research in context, even historically, looking at different ways people measured things, maybe 30 years ago versus now. There are so many reasons that you can't make an isolated judgment without knowing all of that. And I'm not saying one person can know all of that, but we at least have to have a working knowledge together to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to the practical stuff, Joe, not to cut you off with the research thing, because that's certainly important, but I want to go back really quick to what you're doing currently, because I know you have some goals. You've talked about them recently, about dropping some level of body fat. So right now you're experimenting with fasted morning cardio. And when you got started, it didn't feel so good. Now you're up to 20 minutes and you're not feeling so bad. Are you supplementing at all with, or have you chosen to supplement with branched chains because you're losing body fat? And I would assume that muscle retention is important to you and you're in a caloric deficit right now. Are you supplementing with branched chains or anything else, creatine, glutamine? And are you using caffeine to boost let me reframe that, to reduce the amount of perceived fatigue getting going without any solid food?
So that's going to be the second phase of my personal trial, because I wanted to go through a couple weeks of just saying on water alone, just waking up, how am I going to feel? Because I wanted to test that 40% level that I threw out there a few weeks ago. Can my body adapt? How quickly will it take to where I feel better? And I just increased my ability to train from body fat. But I go back a long time ago to when I used to train in the morning, and this is back when I was training clients in my first gym that I owned. So I would often, get to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I would want to get some of my aggressive training done. At one particular point, I was doing some track work. I got up to a 6-minute mile or so. And so many times for my cardio in the morning, I was just, waking up, and maybe an hour later, I was doing that. I was running 12 miles an hour on a treadmill. And very quickly, I noticed that I did need some carbohydrates. This was back when I first started looking up studies on fasted cardio. And even back then, 15, 20 years ago, there was already research showing that it was not effective. So having some carbohydrates, et cetera, all that for pure performance. Right now, performance is not my main goal in the mornings. I am saving that for the afternoon training. So what I'm going to do next is start using an intentional amount of caffeine and probably some branched chain aminos. So, instead of sipping on some kind of thermogenic drink to where you don't even know what level you have in your body when you're training, I will probably wake up, get some water, maybe in capsule form, get a thermogenic, so I can at least get back up to that level of intensity. Again, some of the research I read just recently talked about, caffeine is an ergogenic supplement.
Right.
So then glutamine, branched chain aminos, I will gradually, when my goals might be not losing, 5 or 10 pounds of body fat, I will gradually then do what you're doing, which is supplementing even back in with carbohydrates, because then I want pure performance. It's not going to be about necessarily the body fat loss. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. And as I said, I'm going to anecdotally take some notes and hopefully reconfirm some of these things. But I also do want to point out, this is my whole point to this, and then we'll wrap up. Even for people who do want to retain lean body mass, if you just enjoy fasted work, you might get up to the point where you're using some glutamine, branched chains, leucine, other things, pre-workouts, caffeine, creatine. But if you just don't want to eat food pre or even post-workout for a while, because the most important thing for lean body mass gain and retention and even bone density is the physical work, in that you just get enough nutrition overall in your day, even if you don't maintain the same amount of lean body mass, you don't stay in a catabolic state that just goes on forever and then you end up looking like a marathon runner. You will not reach the certain level of state as if you were doing fed training, but that doesn't mean you have to stop it. If you're just a couple pounds lighter in terms of lean body mass, you're maybe 3 to 5% lower in strength overall because you're doing that, that will become your homeostatic home base. And maybe that's fine. That might totally fit your goals. But that's what I wanted to end with, in terms of, even though we're going for performance and maximum effort and maximum work and maximum lean body mass retention, you don't lose all of that if you want to do fasted work. You'll just sacrifice a little bit, your body will adapt, and life will be fine.
Yeah,
so
that's a really important point, because I think some of our listeners are probably thinking that very thing. Well, fasted means I'm going to lose muscle. My body's going to start using, protein for energy. So how do we stop that?
And you'll use amino acids for a short period of time, but then you're going to be eating a meal with protein. You're going to have a certain amount of protein for the day, which will put a cap on those actual results. So let's do this. Next time, we'll talk about post-workout nutrition, and we'll pull that back into pre-workout, because it is about the full day and the full context. But we'll start picking apart these meals one at a time and see exactly what the best form of nutrition might be for your goals.
Perfect, Joe. Thank you for today. I get so many questions about this, so this will be a perfect segment.
Good deal.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you.